Welcome to People Pulse, the podcast where we explore the dynamic intersection of HR, culture, and innovation. I'm Nena Dimovska, your host, and today we'll dive deep into the world of corporate culture with none other than Charlie Sull. Charlie is a globally established expert in corporate culture and co founder of CultureX. His work, including the Measuring Culture series in MIT Sloan Management Review, reaches millions and helps redefine how companies measure and enhance their culture. In today's episode, we'll uncover insights on people and culture intelligence, build positive workplace cultures, use technology for culture measurement, address toxic behavior, and much more. Okay, so let's dive in. So,
Okay.
Charlie, who do you think would be responsible to be driving this culture transformation? You mentioned that the top leadership buying is critical, but who do you think should be driving this forward?
Yeah, so the model we recommend for effective cultural management is quite simple. So you need a couple of things. You need high quality cultural data, which we can talk about, but most companies already have that. You need an effective culture AI platform, which most companies don't have. They're using this, long 1932 survey. Then you need what we call this position of the cultural owner within the company. So this is a very important position. So this is the liaison between the cultural data and AI platform and executive leadership. So for a person with this role, you need kind of a mixture of quantitative savvy because you're going to be dealing with a ton of
Mm,
numbers. These cultural AI platforms just spit out a lot of numbers. And you're also going to need some qualitative understanding of the thought leadership behind how culture works, because it's going to be difficult to make sense of things if you don't have that. You're going to need strong data storytelling skills, because basically all of your job is taking all this data, turning it into stories that you can then tell to executive leadership. And you're going to need strong senior stakeholder
mm,
relationship management skills, because a lot of the job is going to be understanding what the CFO's priorities are and how to please him or her. And then finally, you need a direct line of communication. It's vital that this is a direct line of communication. It can't be mediated through all these different levels of HR and all these different people with executive leadership, ideally the CEO, him or
mm.
herself. So if you have that direct line of communication, someone competent analyzing the AI platform and reporting these narratives back to executive leadership. And then the final piece of the puzzle, of course, is this will. If you have a leadership who actually prioritizes this and listens to these insights that they're receiving and takes them seriously, then if it's a competence in your leadership, they're going to figure it out. And the exact ways they figure this out, what they delegate to
Mm.
HR, what they delegate to, the VPs of HR, what they delegate to people analytics, what they delegate to, different parts of the organization. Exact solutions are going to vary depending on, a million different things within the company. But if you have this essential dynamic, if you have strong data, if you have a strong AI platform to measure it, if you have a talented culture owner that's giving high quality insights to the CEO, and if the CEO and the top team are bought in, and if everyone's reasonably competent, then the rest is details. They'll figure it out. They'll figure it out. So that's what we'd recommend is the backbone of a cultural management model. And then the exact details, what role does HR
Mm,
play? That's going to vary in every
mm.
company. But if you have a strong executive leadership that's bought in and that's taking this problem seriously, they'll figure out details
Yeah.
like that.
So it seems that you're saying that the foundation of it is a strong AI enabled platform or technology. I would just like to hear your viewpoint on, what's the future of culture in organizations that's shaped in a way by AI? How can managers prepare to integrate these tools in a ways that protect and even enhance the culture integrity that their companies have, while at the same time staying competitive in this AI driven landscape?
Yeah, I think it's not so much a technology challenge. I mean, the technology is largely already there and it's just going to get better. I mean, basically What you're trying to do with this is just employee listening, voice of the employee, understanding what employees say across hundreds of different cultural topics. That's relatively low-hanging fruit for, a good large language model. Like this is already a fairly solved problem from a technological standpoint. What's really going to determine the overall state of culture and whether culture improves across the world isn't so much it advances in the technology, it's whether leadership becomes bought into the idea that culture matters and whether they begin really taking this seriously and they start to think of this, they make the mental shift from culture as this, like amorphous, abstract thing that can mean a million different things, not grounded in evidence, to culture as, oh, wow, this is probably my company's single biggest asset. What are the most effective ways that we can manage it? And part of that, again, involves making this shift from culture as abstract to concrete and measurable. So really, and that's what I spend a lot of my time doing. It's not so much talking about the technology, it's talking about, why culture is important, what culture is exactly, and trying to get this leadership buy-in. Because the reality is, you look at the people who are calling the shots today, the CEOs, they're 55 years old, 65 years old, maybe. When they went to business school, that was, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And in business school, they weren't taught anything about culture, really. I mean, even
Even
now,
now.
there are very few classes taught about culture in business school. So they weren't taught, what culture is. They weren't taught why culture matters. They weren't taught how to improve culture. If they did learn these things, and quite a few of them have, they kind of had to pick it up as they went about their career. So what we're trying to provide, me and my co-founder Don, is this kind of, extracurricular education that they missed in business school, but that they should have learned in business school, which is, hey, here's what culture actually is. It's not all this, nonsense. It's really grounded in evidence. It's really this scientific thing, and it's incredibly important. And you can measure it, and you can change it. So I think really, they're a small group of people. It's not just me and my co-founder. It's a couple other people too, who are pushing for this narrative to catch on amongst business leaders. And if it does, then the culture is really going to improve. And if it doesn't, you can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't have will, the culture's not going to improve that much.
Well said. Well said. So let's say that we have the buy-in from top leadership, right? We have this growth mindset, C-level executives, and they're willing to make the change. Perhaps the next step will be also to get buy-in from the mid-level managers, right? I think it's safe to say that mid-level managers are very important too, also in shaping the workplace culture, but it's also safe to say that they're often pulled in so many directions, and just it's hard for them to focus on the managerial role only. How do you think that technology can help them support their efforts and empower their teams to take ownership, make better decisions, and ultimately drive this culture transformation?
Well, that's the nice thing about using this listening approach where everything's based around listening. So, I mean, I guess from what I've been saying, it might sound like everything comes from the top down. That's not exactly what I mean. I mean, the single most important piece you need is top team prioritization because they have access to all the levers. But really, the insights with which you change the culture are all coming from below and from the middle. So, the the decisions that executive leadership is making to change the culture are all coming from what the middle management and what the frontline employees said. So if that's your dynamic, then and I've seen this 100 times with successful culture engagements, then the executive leadership can go back to the middle management and say, okay, here's what we're focusing on, but we're not, this isn't just, an edict from heaven. The reason we're focusing on this is because this is exactly what the company said. And then again, you can quantify it. You can say, this is how often employees speak about it. This is how they speak about it compared to other companies. This is how they're speaking about it in your specific part of the company. And when you show that employee voice back to the employees, then it becomes much easier to get buy-in. And then they feel like they have ownership of the cultural change process. And once they feel that sense of ownership, then it becomes a lot easier. So really, that's a great point. Of course, middle management buy-in is also essential to culture change, as is frontline employee buy-in, frankly. But at least in my experience, I found that's always the easiest part, because the reason you're making these changes in the first place is because middle management and frontline employees are saying to do this. So they're naturally going to want to be on board.
Thank you. So, what we previously briefly touched base upon is that the traditional way of communicating is inappropriate, let's say inconsistently applied, or even we can say at times too vague. And this also goes for the most challenging communication across organizations. We can agree, giving feedback, right? With the rise of AI powered tools, how do you see the technology enabling more constructive, personalized, data driven, right? Feedback conversations. And what challenges do you think that managers should be aware of?
Well, I think there are two dynamics. So one is the dynamic between the manager and the employee. And my point of view on this is AI shouldn't change that much, because these conversations shouldn't be mediated too much by technology. These should just be direct conversations that you're having on a regular basis with your direct reports, where you can have natural human communication. And really, you don't need that much of a technology solution to make conversations like these better. But the second dynamic is between employees and leadership. When you have, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of employees. And in that case, you really do need technology, because it's impossible to make sense of all these voices if you don't have technology. And the role of AI is completely transformational here. Because before, if you go to, 99 out of 100 companies, if they do have some way of making sense of all this employee feedback from thousands of employees, it's going to be through this survey that was designed in 1932. It's this Likert scale survey, 1 to 5. I agree, I agree, I agree. And you get low quality insights, versus with AI, you now get high quality insights. So that's the fundamental transformation. And that's why I think, this has the potential to be so cool. For the first time in history,
Mhm.
you now are able to understand what employees are saying at scale with high fidelity. You can understand what their problems actually are. If you're, a good leader, you can actually solve their problems a lot better. You can understand your strengths and challenges, how to address your cultural challenges. You can make your culture better. And that's why I think, even if it sounds very technical, like this, jump between Likert scale surveys and AI surveys, it actually has the potential to do these very cool
Mm.
transformations that make millions of people's lives better, and also create more economic
No,
value.
true. What you're saying is that the culture is a solvable challenge, right? So how can companies ensure that they're not just solving the surface level issues, but they're really driving long-term cultural transformation? What advice would you give to managers? How to start? What battles to pick?
I mean, I'd say even if you're just solving the surface level challenges, that's some progress. That's more than most companies do. Yeah, I mean, my advice, I think I've already said it. Basically, if you want to improve a culture, it's very, very simple. You need two things. You need will, top team prioritization, and you need knowledge. You need an effective AI cultural measurement system. This traditional 1932 1 to 5 point scale system is not going to tell you what your culture is. So if you have both of these pieces, if you have will and if you have knowledge, your culture will improve. So in terms of first steps, I'd recommend investing in, a cheap taster of a culture AI platform, and getting a read of your culture, maybe using an external employee review platform like Indeed or Glassdoor. And then you can go to your senior leadership and say, "Hey, look, we have real cultural challenges, or our culture's great, but there's still ways to improve it." And so then you get will. And then if you have top team prioritization about actually improving the culture, then the next step is investing further in this cultural management model that I was talking about, where you want a sophisticated culture AI platform, you want good data, you want to have someone talented in this role of culture owner, and you want to have a direct line of communication between the culture owner and the CEO. And I guarantee you, if you have all of those things, if you have the will, if you have the knowledge, if you have that kind of model, your culture will improve, and your culture will improve significantly in a short amount of time. And if you're missing any of those things, your culture probably will not improve that much.
Well said. So, looking at the next decade, how do you see AI changing the way organizations approach culture?
It depends because again, it's for me, it's not so much a technological thing. The cultural measurement technologies are already there. It's more of a leadership mindset
Mm,
shift. So if leaders do buy into this idea that culture matters and they do prioritize solving it, then the technology is going to play a vital role because you won't have this whole industry of all these crappy 1 to 5 point scale surveys. That'll all go extinct. And instead, you'll have culture AI, which can actually do a good job of this question and tell you effective ways to improve your culture. And then you'll also have leadership prioritizing the culture. So it'll be great. The culture will dramatically improve. Right now, the average culture rating on Glassdoor is about 3.5. If this really takes off, if effective cultural management really takes off and leaders are bought into it and they have the technology, then you can see that dramatically improving. It wouldn't surprise me if it really took off to see the average culture rating improve from 3.5 to 4.0. Some dramatic transformation like that is possible. But if you don't have the transfer, if you don't have the leadership buy-in, then I see a much more gray vision for how AI is going to affect HR and culture. I mean, it looks right now, if you're reading the news, the big thing in HR technology isn't cultural management. It's all these agentic AI bots that are going to, take onboarding and remove the human element from it and take, talent attraction and remove the human element from it, and it's all about cost reduction. It's all about efficiency. It's all about layoffs. I don't think it's very exciting. And I think it's actually going to probably make the culture worse because before, you know, take onboarding, for instance, onboarding isn't just this process to be ruthlessly
mm,
streamlined with AI technology. It's this vital way that new employees learn what the culture is, what values are smiled upon, what values are frowned upon, what they should do, how they should behave culturally. So I think unless leaders really buy into this idea that culture matters and that it's this important asset that you should manage, if they don't do that, and if things continue basically like they basically are now, you'll see this very dark future where AI is basically the role AI is playing is just replacing human jobs and laying people off, and it's actually going to make the culture worse. So it really just all depends on whether leadership is bought into the idea of culture because the technology is already there either
mm.
way.
Interesting. I was about to ask you that I read, I think it was just your recent LinkedIn post. It was just from a few days ago where you expressed your concern about the agentic AI and automating some of the HR processes that you've just mentioned. But I think that train has left the station. I mean, these agentic AI tools are, some of them are already out there. Now it's just a matter of how they're going to be integrated into the way we work and where will be the human in the loop and how human and machines are going to work together and what will that mean for the culture in the organization. And with all of these complexities, future with so many changes and unknown variables, what's your advice to leaders? Like, what's one piece of advice that you would like to close with about culture, technology, and where to start in 2025?
I guess, I mean, in terms of what I haven't already covered, maybe I'll end with some analysis we did recently where we took a sample of 3.6 million Glassdoor employees, the free text of what they
Impressive.
wrote, and we looked at assessments of each company's culture. Just when they would say things like the culture here is good, the culture here is bad, the work environment is good, just general assessments of culture. Which companies spoke about that the most positively and the most negatively compared to their industry? And we took that cultural dimension of just general mentions of culture, and then we looked across hundreds of different topics to see what strong mentions of culture were most strongly correlated with. So when employees speak positively about the culture, they're also speaking positively about this thing, and vice versa. And the number one highest thing that a strong culture was correlated with was caring about
Mm,
employees. So when employees say the culture is strong, they're very likely to say that the company cares about them. The company makes them feel like they're being cared about. And conversely, when employees say that the culture is weak, they're also very likely to say that the company does not care about them. So my advice to leadership is kind of a bigger note if you're trying to improve your culture. I mean, obviously, the rest of the stuff I talked about, adopting the technology is also very important. But maybe the first step is just asking yourself, do I care about my reports? Do I care about my coworkers? Do I care about the people in my company? And if you can really, it's kind of a mindset shift. If you can really make that shift to, yes, I care about these people as people, the rest of culture, at least our research suggests, will flow from that relatively naturally. If you really care about people, you're going to want to make sure they have fair compensation. You're going to want to make sure they have development opportunities. You're going to want to make sure they're being respected, they're being included, they're not being treated unfairly. So I guess on a parting note, I would say the number one thing that's correlated with the strong culture across the sample of 3.6 million employees is caring about employees. And maybe if you're listening to this today, this can be your daily reminder to care about the people you work with as humans.
Thank you. I mean, that's such a benevolent and optimistic thought. And let's close on that. I mean, there's so much more to discuss and learn. Hope we'll have a chance to do this again. And thank you so much for the talk, Charlie.
Of course. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you for tuning in to People Pulse. Charlie shared some amazing tips on building healthier, more productive companies. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your network. Keep your finger on the pulse of your people, empower them, and success will follow. See you in the next episode.